start your presentation.
All right, thanks, Chris. And you guys can hear me in the room all right?
Yes.
Okay, I'll definitely be brief so we can get some time back on the agenda. I'm just going to talk about some of the data we've been updating and looking at as part of the Oregon Freight Plan update. Talk about some economic data, some freight flow data, and then some broader industry economic, events and trends of the time. So this first chart is showing us the GDP by sector for Oregon. On the right-hand side, we have blue bars, which is the GDP by industry for 2023, and the orange bars are for 1997. So looking at just the blue bars, the top sectors in 2023 are real estate, rental and leasing, state and local government, and durable goods manufacturing, which includes things like computer parts, electronics. A lot of that has actually been growing considerably in Oregon. Followed by that, we have things like healthcare and social assistance, and professional, scientific, and technical services, and also information, which is sort of a broad, newer industry meant to capture the tech industries. So the largest growth has been in durable goods manufacturing, again, those computer electronic parts, information, since 2000, definitely the tech industry has been one of those massive, massive growths. The digital scaling is, when does it stop? I don't know. Another couple high growth industries are management of companies and professional, scientific, and technical services. So even though it may seem like things are, all digital or service oriented in the modern economy, not necessarily so. We still see durable goods manufacturing is still a considerable component of Oregon's economy, alongside other real industries like retail trade, wholesale trade, and construction, interestingly, is actually down in real terms since 1997. All of these industry numbers are shown in real 2017 dollars to try to account for inflation. And then we also see other sort of real industries, agriculture, mining. They're a little smaller in comparison to some of the other industries in Oregon, but they are still around and they're pretty constant, showing some growth since 1997. So this next graph is showing us where does the economy happen in Oregon. So for each county, we have a pie chart, and the size of the pie chart is the total county GDP on a log scale. So a big circle means a lot, a little circle means a little. And then the color of the wedges show what proportion of that county's GDP are which industry. So first, looking at the big pink wedge, which is professional and business services, you can see that is very high in metropolitan areas, especially Portland and the surrounding area. But even to a good extent in Eugene and Corvallis and Salem, and Bend as well. Other sort of service-oriented economies you associate to be concentrated in metropolitan regions are information, this lighter blue wedge, and and also government and government enterprises, the sort of cyan green, and then finance, insurance, and real estate, the brighter green. We see big wedges in these high metropolitan areas. Interestingly, we see a large wedge of manufacturing happening just outside of Portland in the county of the West, as well as in the suburbs. Although in the core part of Portland, we aren't seeing a lot of manufacturing, which makes sense given real estate prices. And generally, these types of activities tend to get pushed out of the city center. Looking at Eastern Oregon, you see a large concentration of the purple wedge, which is an aggregate of a bunch of different industries, the other industries that didn't make the top 8. So that includes agriculture, forestry, mining, transportation services, and warehousing. All of these are very prominent on these eastern, less populated areas. So where is the economy growing in Oregon? This graph is showing us the percentage growth from 2001 to 2023. And my read of this graph is that the highest percentage growth is along the I-84 corridor, along the north, as well as the US 97 corridor around Bend. Bend is showing the highest population and economic in terms of percentage. It's a very hot spot in the last 20 years. These other two counties up here, Gilliam County and Sherman County, they're very small, so their high growth may just be some noise in the data. But given their proximity to I-84, it could be we're seeing some actual placement of economic activity there for that freight convenience. Also, so this is just the percentage growth. The highest absolute growth is still in the major metropolitan areas: Portland, Salem, Eugene, and Bend. So this graph is showing us the freight mode share by tonnage. This is something we look at a lot for the Oregon Freight Plan to understand, which modes are doing what and how are they doing over time. The first block of bar charts here is 2017 to 2023. This is actual data and estimates. Everything after that, these 5-year increments, are the forecasts. And all this data is put together by Federal Highway Administration through their freight analysis framework. So a couple things to highlight from this graph. This purple bar is truck. Truck has the largest share of freight by a pretty big margin. Next after them is pipeline, and this is by tonnage. I'll show the same graph for value in the next slide. Rail and water. Rail is the blue bars here. Water is the pink bars. They're pretty small shares comparatively, but they're pretty stable over time, maybe having a small decrease from 2017 to 2023. And the total tonnage of freight is relatively stable since 2017. So the same graph, this time looking at value. We see again, truck has the largest share of freight by value. Rail has a smaller share compared to its share for tonnage, but also stable over time. Similar to water, although water appears to be slightly decreasing from 2017, at least in terms of like the value of freight going on water. Air comparatively has a considerably higher share by value than by tonnage, which appears to be growing over time, which may be related to Oregon's growth in manufacturing of high value, low weight goods like electronics and computer parts and precision instruments. So this table is just showing us the top commodities by mode. The middle column is the top commodities by tonnage. The right commodity is by value. And you can see this for each of the different modes: truck, rail, water, air, pipeline, and mixed modes. Gravel, logs, and wood products are consistently top commodities for Oregon across modes. Mixed freight, electronics, machinery, precision instruments are pretty consistently top commodities for a lot of different modes. And those are the high value, low weight goods. You also see here that low value, high weight goods are more prominent on rail and water, which makes sense given their specialties. They're lower cost per weight because of how they can transport the goods. And we notice that air is used primarily for low weight, high value goods, which also makes sense because it takes a lot of energy to get things off the ground, but it's faster. So you only really want to use that for those low weight, high value goods. I don't have a lot to say on this. This is just sort of informational showing the top 4 commodities by tonnage. Which industries are they? And we see natural gas and other fossil products, gravel, wood products, and non-metal mineral products. There definitely seemed to be a bit of a dip right after COVID and during COVID. A lot of industries seem to be rebounded, but not all of them. We see non-metal mineral products, for instance, is still showing some decline. But it's hard to put a lot of weight in this because it's not a long time frame, and there's a lot of other changes happening in the economy right now. Similarly, we see the top commodities by value are machinery, motorized vehicles, mixed freight, and other foodstuffs. Not a clear takeaways from this for me. Just again, many industries seem to have rebounded after COVID, but there's still noise. And we see some decreasing for mixed freight and other foodstuffs, but the percentage decrease is fairly small. So I would not say these are strong trends of industry decline or anything like that. So this table is just showing us that for Oregon freight with an Oregon origin and destination has the highest tonnage. Next is freight coming into the state, Oregon destination, somewhere else origin. And then exports are slightly lower, although similar magnitude. So overall, Oregon to Oregon freight is the most abundant activity. And then after that, we are importing more than we're exporting by tonnage. And a few just general trends, uncertainties. I'm sure you've heard about a lot of these. The economy appears to have largely stabilized after COVID. A lot of people worried about a recession. Didn't exactly happen. We had a small dip, but nothing Great Depression level. The last few years have shown a return to moderate growth, but with higher inflation. And there's a lot of other concerns happening right now. There's some global events, disruptions to trade from tariffs and wars. There seems to be increasing inequality There's a lot of labor market uncertainty. The cost of living is expanding a lot. People are, the jobs numbers have not been great. So people are worried about that. And we also have some new developments, an increasing amount of near and onshoring of jobs. Previously in the globalization era, a lot of our manufacturing jobs were going overseas to places with lower labor costs or different environmental regulations. And now we're seeing kind of a similar thing happen because of the tech industry, how remote people can work and how we're advancing in those service information economies. So we're also seeing that type of displacement of labor to other countries. AI and RAM production has been a recent development. RAM prices have skyrocketed, largely due to the sort of the speculation or abundance expansion of AI. Although recently just this last week, the RAM prices came down a little bit, so we'll see how that develops. Climate change is an ongoing accelerating phenomenon that a lot of us are worried about. And in Oregon specifically, we're seeing a persistence of increased wildfire frequency. Another Oregon detail, we're also seeing some potential policy changes around timber harvesting and other natural resources. So we'll see how those play out and the impacts those can have on the economy and the transportation system. ODOT is having a lot of funding issues. We're currently working on our Rough Roads Ahead 3 report, where we look at the forecasted conditions to look at the impacts on the economy and travel. And also e-commerce growth has been, it was a big boom during COVID, and then it really kind of stuck around at that higher level. So e-commerce seems to be here to stay and is even growing more. So that's some of the pieces we're looking at for the economic and freight updates for the Oregon Freight Plan, and that's it for me.